Hello and welcome. I am Scrubberlock, and this is City of Heroes. We are with our level 30 character, Liberty Lass. She needs 235,000 XP to get to level 31. We have over 8 million influence, and we are on our final level 30 story arc, or level 25 to 29 story arc, and that is for Ashwin Lannister, who is doing Uberman with us. And the next one is the orders you found in that fifth column base told us exactly where Ugelman is going to be. Can you stop him? If you can, then this is over. So this will be our final episode, I think. Although I said that a bunch of times last time, and I was wrong. I think this will be our final episode of Season 2. And then we will go to Season 3. Now, one of the things I'm probably going to do in between times is, because we need more reward merits and because I missed some of the arcs, at least a couple of the arcs in the 20s, I'm going to go to Ouroboros, and I'm going to run some story arcs through there off screen. You don't get experience from them, but I think you get the reward merits for finishing the story arc. We'll see. I'll let you know if that's true, but I think so. In the meantime, let's go ahead and finish this story arc, and then we'll do a little bit in Ouroboros so you can see how that works. And hopefully, by the time the next episode airs, it will be Season 3, and that will be in the 30s, and we'll have some more reward merits, so eventually we can maybe get one of those archetype enhancers. So we have to defeat Uberman and his guards. We've got a good set of inspirations, I think. I don't know that there's anything else to be done to prepare for this. If he shouldn't be too powerful, right? This is the mission is set to +1, but 29 is the level cap for these story arcs, so level 30 is the level cap for the mission. So the mission itself is actually even to us, even though it says +1. And that means that Uberman shouldn't be more than level 31, and we should be able to take a level 31 elite boss, no problem. Well, a little note here, this is Portal Corp. Portal Corp maps are literally the lab maps, the lab assets, but reskin to be gray instead of blue. And really, when they just reskin them, it does add quite a bit of a different look to these maps, even though they're basically the same map. Hey Vamp, you just sitting here? Sometimes vampires, depending on whether they're lieutenants or bosses, can turn into werewolves. We've seen that once. I'm not sure if they can do it if they're mezzed. So what happens is when they get to a certain sliver of health, I guess about 20% health, they will change to werewolves. I'm not sure if you can keep them stunned, held, etc. when they're in that range down to 0, if they can still automatically change even while mezzed, or if they'll stop them. I don't actually know the answer to that. We might try it and see if we come across one. It's going to be hard to keep them stunned long enough to get them from, say, 20% health down to 0. This is really interesting. I like to write, and I've actually tried to get back into doing some fiction writing. I've done a little. I started working on what I thought was a short story, and it's gotten a bit long. That's sort of a cosmic horror, doing entirely discovery writing. So I just started with a premise, which was basically two people at a science in a science lab hearing a weird noise, and then they go to investigate. And I didn't know what the noise was or what was going to happen, and I'm now like the equivalent of about 60 pages into it. If you were to turn it into like hardcover or paperback pages, I'm about 60 pages into it, and it's interesting, but I'm not sure what the solution is going to be. Are the main characters going to die, go insane, survive? I don't really know. And so I got to a certain point, I got a bit stuck. I haven't done any more with that. I started working on a fantasy story. Didn't get too far with that. So I haven't really found my I haven't really found what's going to work for me. It's when I do, I'll be able to write nonstop and it'll be awesome. But I'm just sort of feeling my way back into the writing process. And so as part of doing that, of course, as we do these days, I went online to look for writing advice. I've read lots of books on writing and stuff. And there are several people who are authors and they are published, I guess. Although I haven't really looked that much into too many of their credentials. But these are published authors who are like, oh, here's how to get your book started, or here's some great advice for overcoming writer's block, or here's how to make memorable characters and stuff like that. Probably the best advice, the best of these. Sometimes the audio and the video is not perfect because it's filmed live in a classroom, but probably the best is Brandon Sanderson's stuff. I mean, he's a very successful published fantasy author, and he runs a class I think every year or so at BYU, which is his alma mater. It's a class that he took when he was an undergrad there, and he teaches basically how to become a published writer in fantasy and science fiction. And he just does a great job. His students ask really good questions, and his answers are fantastic. And one of the things I most like about Brandon Sanderson is he'll say, well, this is how I do it, but there are lots of other ways to do it, and you may find that this does not work for you. And so I do really like that. He never says, oh, you got to do it my way, or this is the only way that'll work. He always goes over the different ways. For instance, he's an outliner, but he did talk about discovery writing. Now, he said at the outset, at least in the video I watched, which was one of his classes, I'm not the best person in the world to talk about this because it's not how I write. So I'm going to explain how some of the writers that I'm friends with do it. But if you really want to do this, you should, get information from these people who do more discovery writing. And then he actually had a guest lecturer because he doesn't do short stories. He said, I'm going to have a short story writer come in here. And so he had a friend of his, I can't remember her name, Mary Robinette or something, I think, who came in and she had the class do flash fiction. She said it's going to be 250 words, and she did exercises with them. And Sanderson was sitting off to the side, off camera, apparently doing it with them. And when it was all done, at the end of the class, she asked him, did you finish it? And he said, yeah. And she said, how long was it? And he said, like 750 words, and everybody laughed because Sanderson's known for, he does not write short works of fiction. He writes very long novels. So I found his to be very helpful and useful and worth watching, actually more than once, although I haven't watched them all once yet, so I certainly haven't watched them more than once. But there are several other writers, I'm not going to name anybody else, some of whom give good advice, some of whom give, what sounds like good advice, and then I find that I can't really make it actionable, right? Maybe it works for them, but it doesn't work for me. And there's this one, and so apparently this little corner of YouTube where you have authors giving advice to budding writers is called AuthorTube. And there is one of them a couple of years ago made a video basically calling out the rest of them in a way and saying to be urging the people watching her. She said, even though I'm doing AuthorTube, be careful, because she said not everything, every author kind of works a different way, and this is what Sanderson says, and what works for these authors on AuthorTube telling you that this is how they write and stuff may not work for you. And so you have to kind of take their advice with a grain of salt. And essentially what she said is all writing, essentially when you start, is trial and error. You have to figure out what works for you. And I promise this will actually be relevant in video games and City of Heroes and role-playing games once we finally get to the point that it's taken me a long time to make. So at any rate, so I'm going to put a little waypoint here so I know that's the down elevator, so I don't go the wrong way, because I'll forget. So anyway, one of the things she said, and I thought this was actually a really valuable bit of advice, is one of the things you should do is actually check the bibliography of this author right? That is to say, is this author published, and how successful has their work been? I remember reading a book, and also what genre do they work in? Is it the same genre you're going to work in? I remember reading a book on how to write with tension and emotion or something like that. And I'm reading this thing going, ugh, I hated most of the advice that this writer was giving. And when I finally looked her up, I found out, oh yeah, she writes romances. And so she writes these sort of very stylized, typical romance novels, like what you want to call like the Harlequin romances. That's what she writes. Now, lots of people like those, and they sell well, and that's fine. But I wouldn't write that, and I wouldn't be writing for an audience that reads that, right? I would be writing cosmic horror or epic fantasy or sword and sorcery, right? And those audiences are looking for something very different from what this writer was trying to coach you how to do. I thought the book was bad in other ways, right? Like, I feel like she told you what your book needs, but really didn't tell you how to achieve it, right? So a story is all about feelings, so you have to have feelings in your story. Okay, how do you do that? You have to have strong emotion in your story. Okay, how do you do that? She didn't explain how to do that, whereas Sanderson actually does explain how to do this. How to make it an emotionally impactful story and that sort of thing. How to make a character likable. But the main issue I had was I didn't really like. I knew that I wouldn't like as a reader to read the stories written in the way she was coaching you to write them, and that's because I'm not a reader of Harlequin romance. Um, it's not a genre I'm interested in. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. Not my genre. There was an author on this author tube, right, was talking about, oh, here's how to write your books and here's how to do this and that. And she's very authoritative. She seems like she knows what she's talking about. And you can even pay to take a class from her and stuff like this. And some of her advice seems pretty good. But one of her videos, she was explaining kind of how to self-publish. And she was going through all this stuff about how to self-publish, and here are some templates you can download and so on. And I thought about it, I'm like, wait a minute. Does this mean she is just entirely self-published? And it turns out she is. Now, there's nothing wrong with self-publishing, but if you want to be a published author, if you want to write a book that's going to be read by more than 5,000 people or something, not that I care. But this is something to be aware of. That's what this one writer was saying. Be aware of their success, their bibliography. A person who's only self-published to a few thousand people in a niche audience is not going to be able to tell you how to write a Brandon Sanderson epic fantasy bestseller. Brandon Sanderson will tell you he can't tell you how to do that, and he's done it, right? Let alone someone who's never actually done it. So what does this have to do with role-playing games? Because this definitely made me think of this as well. And let's see, Ubelman is an elite boss who is level 31. All right, so he is a +1 boss. Let's tempt these guys out, and we're going to clean the room out before we get to Ubelman. Now, there is a bit of a negative to this. It does reduce the incoming aggro and damage that we're going to face. However, by being patient and tempting them out little by little, I am going to lose a little bit of the fury buildup, which means I won't be doing quite as much damage to him as I would if I just blasted my way into the room. So anyway, what does this whole thing about writers have to do with gaming? Well, one of the things I would say is, if you're going to take advice on how to play a game like City of Heroes or any other game where you're watching Let's Plays and stuff, pay attention to how the person who's playing the game is playing it. And there are so many different ways to play these games. Make sure that the person you're going to model yourself after, or whose advice you're going to take, is someone who's playing the game the way you would like to play it. Right? You do not want to take my advice if you want to be an endgame raider, because I don't do that. You're not going to want to take my advice if you're going to primarily want to play trials and task forces on large teams of 7 or 8 characters rather than soloing, because I don't do that. You're not going to want to take my advice. Sorry, I just bumped the mic. You're not going to want to take my advice on doing the incarnate trials. I've never done them. So if you want to do those things, you should find someone on YouTube who does them and take their advice. There's a werewolf. Take their advice from the person who's actually had the experience that you want to have. That's my suggestion. And the same thing when it comes to like GMing and stuff. I mean, Matt Colville is great and he gives great GMing advice. But not every game master has a GMing style like Matt Colville's. And if your group is different from his group, right? He has a very tactical group that likes combat tactics and stuff like this. If your group prefers theatrical roleplay, then his advice for you might not work. All right, now we're going to concentrate a little bit on this because we got to take these guys out. Let's see if we can stun this guy. Did we get him? I don't think so. He might not be stunnable. Oh, we got him. Excellent. We're going to try to just get the other guys with collateral damage just from stunning him. Right? In other words, I'm just doing AoE cones and stuff to him, and we're going to try to hit these guys with the collateral damage from the AoEs. And we have a little bit of an endurance problem now because we're running 4 toggles. So we may have to be careful with that as well. You can see this guy takes a huge amount of punishment. And notice that we do sometimes put those stun circles around his head, but he definitely doesn't stay stunned for long. Just maybe a second. And you see with AoEs we took the other 2 guys out, no problem. Man. There we go. And we got 28 reward merits, guys. That puts us up to 298, just shy of 300. And let's head out. So, I mean, I think this is true for any game. You want to take advice from people who are playing it the way you play it. Be careful with builds and stuff in role-playing games, whether it's build in City of Heroes or an MMO or a build in D&D or Champions or something like that. The guys who are designing the build and posting them have a build with a specific goal in mind, right? Like doing DPS. And if your goal isn't to do DPS, that build will not work for you the way it works for them. Right? I have a build goal in mind with these characters, these melee characters, which is to be rounded. Almost like, I don't want to say jack of all trades because we're not doing buffing and stuff like that. But my goal is to have roughly equal defense and offense, right? So if I'm a scrapper or a brute or a stalker, I tend to lean more heavily into the defense than a lot of people who are obsessed with DPS would do. And if I'm a tanker, I actually lean more heavily into the attack than most of the tank-oriented people do. So my tankers aren't the best at just tanking, but they're great for me, and they do a little bit more offense, and they're more fun for me to solo. My scrappers and brutes, especially scrappers, right? Because brutes are made to kind of tank. They're a little bit tougher than scrappers, but my scrappers are very powerful offensively, but they also have decent defense, right? And so I can off-tank with a scrapper maybe better than other people would, but I'm not doing as much DPS. And so I try to kind of have this rounded out build, right? If we look at the slotting, I mean, there are lots of people who pick a power. They start with a power and they just 6-slot it. And they won't touch the other powers until they've 6-slotted their first power. And then they 6-slot their second power. And they just decide what they're going to 6-slot. And I had friends who were, doing, what they would do is they would do all of their primaries first and leave their secondaries all 1-slotted and then do the secondaries later. I don't like to do that. I like to have my powers have at least medium effectiveness rather than all of them be medium rather than a quarter of them be great and three-quarters of them be awful. you know. But everybody's different with this, and there's no right way to do it. There's the right way for you, and I think that's what this author was trying to say. Um, that the way these writers are describing, yes, this one author who has 1 million followers on YouTube and is self-published and teaches writing classes probably makes way more money from YouTube and teaching writing classes to 1 million fans, right, than she does from her self-published novels. That doesn't mean she can't teach you how to write, but if you want to be like her, it's not going to be the same path. And what works for her isn't going to turn you into a Brandon Sanderson best-selling author, right? You need to get Brandon Sanderson advice for that, or Patrick Rothfuss's advice for that, who's another best-selling author, or George R. R. Martin, who's another best-selling author. And again, each one of those three works very differently. And so what works for one isn't necessarily going to work for the other. And similarly with gameplay, what works for one player isn't necessarily going to work for other players. So what you need to do is find what you like to do, which, just like with writing, takes some trial and error. And then when you figure it out, try to find people who play like you if you need advice and get advice from them. So if you want to solo characters that are really good at doing damage and doing something like defender controls, a dominator, scrapper, maybe tanker, stalker, etc., and you want to do a lot of soloing and follow the story arcs and just get from level 1 to 50 and enjoy the journey rather than an endgame build, I'm probably your guy. If you mimic what I do, you'll probably have a lot of fun. But if you want to do the endgame stuff, you don't want to follow my advice, because my advice is not going to get you the 1 billion or 8 billion or however many influence it is that you have to need for farming, to get your farming build so you can keep farming to get your Hamadon raid build or whatever it is. Like, I don't know any of that stuff. I have no interest in it. So you don't want to follow my advice if that's what you want to do, right? So I can explain how the basic game works, but when it comes to build advice or any of that, the best thing to do is to find somebody, find a person giving pointers and tips and advice who's playing the game the way you like to play it, and follow their advice. It doesn't mean you have to, by the way, watch them. I can't remember who it was way back during Silver Phoenix who made a post saying that, like, he spends all of his time farming and doing the end game raiding, like the end game trials, and doesn't have time to also play the game through the normal story arcs. So instead, he kind of watches my videos while he's doing other things, and that allows him to get the story arc experience from City of Heroes even though he doesn't have time to play it. So you can watch somebody who doesn't play the way you do and not worry about the advice and watch anything, and it's fine. But if you're looking for help on how to build a character or do something like that, you probably want to go with people who are playing the game in the way that you either like to play it or think you would like to play it, to see how they do it. All right. Now, speaking of watching how to do stuff, if you want to go to Uroboros, the way this works, since I've already done the sort of entree mission that starts things off, is that you can go to the... I can't remember now. I got to find where it is. These things here. Other players will always lead you to the right place. And you click on it, and you look at the mission list, and it gives you the levels and which missions you've done. So you can see that we have done this story arc because there's a little star next to it. Looks like we haven't done any of these. These are Protector of Innocence. I don't know what those are. Guardian. So we've done Clockwork Captive and Bonefire. We haven't done the Vajjalak Pollutant Plot, the Wasting Disease, right? Wow, this is tons and tons of these things. We've done the Superding Ring. So there are a whole bunch of these we haven't done. And then if we go into the, like, 25 to 29, we didn't do the Freak Olympics, right? That's actually a really fun one, and I just could not get that one. So what you can do is say, okay, I want to start this. So the Freak Show Rampage is in the office. We're going to start this. And now you can ask, do you want a time limit? This is sort of a challenge. Do you want to limit your lives? The team is allowed 0 defeats, etc. Do you want to limit your powers? Right? Do you want to debuff or buff the enemies or what have you? I don't know that we need to do any of that. Let's just accept the current ratings. And now we're going to go to Talos Island and bust the freak leader and his crew. Now I'm not going to show you this whole story arc. If you want to play the Freaklipic story arc, you can do that in game, either in the 20s if one of your contacts offers it to you, or you can go to Ouroboros like I did and wander on over to those little crystals and get the Freaklimpics story arc handed to you that way. So this was done, like one of the purposes of Ouroboros was that the developers didn't realize, and I guess things have changed now because a lot of players don't do the story arcs anymore, but a lot of us players liked specific story arcs, and we got frustrated when there weren't enough story arcs. We wanted more, but then when they started putting more and more story arcs into the game, we started to get frustrated, and it's a little black and white to show that it's a flashback mission. We started to get frustrated that, well, we wanted this story arc, and it's not letting us have it. Can't you allow us to play this story arc as a flashback, right? So now notice we have an orange level number. We're level 29 now. We should have lost this power because we got it at level 30, but maybe because it's only one level. It may allow you to keep it if you can have taken it before that level. But if we go down to like level 10 or something, it's not going to allow us to keep it, right? And so what it does is it starts pulling powers out of your characters, would graze them out, right? It locks powers out of your character's power tray that you wouldn't have had access to at this level, so that you can actually play the story arc correctly. Our hit points have already also been lowered to level 29 hit points, I assume. And one difference is that you have is they don't get rid of your inspiration tray. So you can go down to a low level mission, but still have a tray of 15 inspirations, which you wouldn't have at like level 5, And that can make it a little bit easier. Now, you don't necessarily have to use them. And you can also impose lots of limits on your character. Oh, we have to leave this guy out. I'm stupid. And we're going to get ambushed. Yeah, right here. Yeah, so one thing that I did that's a little dangerous is I've got the, this is a flashback mission. I've got it set on +1, and that's probably stupid. I assume it's +1, yes. Yeah, so we're level 29. It's a level 30 mission. No, that's not a problem. This is a brood, and we have lots of power. And, yeah, we have no problem against these guys. But yeah, so the one thing to be careful of, and again, this is going to depend on your archetype and depend on how many levels you lose. But especially if you're going down to like 10th level or something, you probably don't want to keep it on +1. So one of the things I would take a look at for your character is at what point did you bump the difficulty, if you did, to +1. We bumped it at level 22. So if we go below level 22, then what we would probably want to do is bring the mission difficulty back to +0 while we're doing these flashbacks below level 22. So if I think the level 20 to 25 ones will keep us at 24, and these keep us at 29. So for those, I can keep the difficulty on +1. But if I go down into the lower levels, like 15th level or whatever, 14th, 19th, 9th, 4th, that probably is where I need to go down to +0. Because otherwise, I mean, you lose a lot of... Now, what you do keep, I think, is the SOs, right? I think you still keep the enhancements on your powers. I'm not really sure. Somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong. I can't remember if the SOs continue to count or not. I feel like they did something with those. I think, like, for instance, the generics might scale down to your level. I'm not really sure. I don't know. If anybody knows how that works, somebody tell us in the comments so that other people listening can find out. And I will, if somebody answers me, then I will also bring it up orally in the commentary here after I read it. It'll be a while because I'm about 8 episodes behind posting because I've been playing multiple. I only post one a day, but I've been playing multiple episodes a day because I'm just having so much fun. I will start getting caught up after this episode, I think, because I'm going to be playing a number of flashback missions without recording, since they're flashbacks and they're not gaining us any XP or anything. Are they? Wait a minute. Are they gaining us XP? They're not supposed to. Aren't they only supposed to gain us influence? Hang on. Yeah, I'm going to have to turn the XP off if it's giving us XP. Here we go. So let's take a look. We were at 1215. I thought these didn't give you experience points. I thought they only gave you influence. That'll sort of defeat the purpose, right? We don't want to be doing... Yeah, it's giving us XP. We don't want to be getting XP from these, because the whole purpose of them is to get merits faster than the leveling up would normally give it to you. Yeah, we don't want that. So let's go to options. Whoops. No. Well, our global handle is Scrapperlock. Somebody asked me that, and I was like, how the heck do I check that? I just found it. Let's go to options, and we're going to disable XP. It's right down there on the bottom of the first page. So now we only gain influence. I don't care about the influence. What I'm trying to do is try to get more reward merits without getting, without leveling up, right? Because we need more reward merits in order to buy our ATOs. So what I was going to do is just do maybe like one story arc, like every time I complete a story arc in the current level range, go back and do one flashback off screen, and that will allow me to gain more merits more quickly, but also get caught up on my videos, posting them, you know. I could have sworn flashbacks only gave you influence and not XP. I guess not. So again, talking about like the style of play, right? What am I doing here? I am purposely not getting XP, right? Not everybody's going to do that. I'm doing this partly just to play the story arcs, and partly because I want to get more reward merits. A lot of it's to play the story arcs. But I turned the XP off because if I don't, then what's going to happen is we're going to play this whole level 29 story arc at level 31, right, or 30. We're going to get all this XP for it. We're going to level up, and then we're going to start, and we've missed doing the story arcs for the contacts in our level range, right? And by the way, talking away, I've forgotten to wait for the freaks to res, which they've done a couple times and I wasn't even really paying attention. So yeah, so the purpose of doing this is to get the arc done, to get the reward merits for the arc, and not level up past the level of the level 30 to 34 missions that we haven't even done yet. Like Philippa Moreau is going to give us one against the Cray, I think. I think she's one of the ones that gives you against the Cray, and there's a bunch of other people. You know, we're going to get Richti missions, hopefully, and so on. We've still never done a Devouring Earth mission, but there should be some of those in the 30s. And I think Drek is in the 30s as well. That's a freak show mission. I'm not sure whether it's a 30 to 35 or 35 to 40. But what we don't want to do is spend gain so much XP from the flashback missions that we outlevel the next set of missions, right? So we're only going to do these with XP turned off. And since the XP will not be being gained, I don't know that you guys necessarily want to see all of that. I don't want to make this series unbelievably insanely long. I assume the last hostage will not be on this floor, but we should check. Because there's another elevator, and presumably they put the last hostage on the last level. So again, you know, what playstyle do you have? Is it, if it's not the sort of style where you would turn XP off so that you can see story arcs because you love the story arcs, then you don't necessarily want to copy what I'm doing. And so yeah, I listened to her, this one video of this author. Of course, and there was a meta to it, right? And she registered the irony of someone from AuthorTube telling you shouldn't listen to other authors on AuthorTube because, you know, what do they know about your own, you know, habits and stuff and what's going to work for you? And of course, her doing that was, you know, if you listen to her, you're listening to her telling you what to do on AuthorTube, right? I mean, sort of the same thing. But yeah, what she said resonated with me in part because I recognized, oh, that's the same thing as watching a Let's Play and the person is playing a game in the way that you would never enjoy playing it, right? And be careful trying to copy people who are playing a game in the way that you wouldn't like it. This is the wrong elevator. And see, that's why I marked the other one, right? Because when I come in and there's and then I find another elevator and then I wander around a lot, I forget which way did I come in? And it all looks basically the same, right? So same carpeting, same everything. It's very hard to keep track of which one's which. So we're going up to the 3rd floor. Now, I don't know if I've mentioned this in this playthrough. I mentioned it ad nauseum with Silver Phoenix and Tiger Shrike. But these offices with the elevators and the labs, anything that's got an elevator in it that can take you up another floor, have a maximum of 5 floors. That's the way they're coded. And so this is the 3rd floor. There technically could be up to 2 more floors, regardless of floor size. Sometimes they're large floors, sometimes they're small. It's unlikely that this will have a bunch of empty floors, but it could. But no more than to the 5th floor. So we're on the 3rd. There could be up to 2 more floors. I suspect not. In fact, I would be surprised if the hostage isn't in here, because this little pattern of corridor and room layout is often where the clues and the hostages are and the bosses are found. But, you know, you never know. And a lot of this is sort of the computer randomly choosing from amongst a set of possible options, right? So the office area has a couple of spawn points on a floor, and which one the computer chooses, right? Often there's one up here, but the computer may choose a different spawn point for the hostage, right? It's just random. It gives it 2 or 3 options, and it just randomly picks one of them. So there's nobody up here, but a lot of times there is. This whole, you know, you have to do what works for you, and do it by trial and error. That's true for a lot of things. Students often get frustrated when they ask me, like, how am I supposed to study for your class? And I said, look, I can tell you how I used to study for a class like this and what worked for me. And it might work for you, but it might not, because everybody's brain works a little bit differently, and what works for me may not work for you, right? So what worked for me was writing stuff out over and over again, but that may not work for you. Maybe flashcards. Flashcards did nothing for me. I tried them. I spent a lot of time on them as a freshman in college, and they were utterly useless to me, and I just don't use them. What works for me instead is writing things down and then writing them over and over and over again. But that might not work for you. Maybe flashcards work better for you. Maybe singing it as a song works better for you. Like everybody learns differently. Um, just like every teacher has a different teaching style, and what I had to do was learn how to convert what the teacher was doing, whatever it was in class, and what the textbook was doing, whatever it was in the textbook, to what worked for me. Right? By the way, this also kind of semi-works for me in video games, although never completely. What I often tried to do after falling in love with the Scrapper and getting used to the Scrapper mode of gameplay, what I often tried to do... Okay, we've missed somebody. What I often used to try to do was convert how whatever game I was playing played to be able to play it like I was playing a Scrapper. Yeah, so we do have a blank one. We could be up to 2 more floors. I tried to play other games like a Scrapper. I tried to design my characters to be like Scrappers. The problem is with that many games simply don't have a character type that really plays like a COH Scrapper. Melee DPS, yes, but it's often not balanced quite the same way. And the whole idea of being able to really do Scrapper Lock and be able to do it with impunity once you've properly designed your character and built it right. Some games, just the way the game is balanced, don't really allow that. Champions is one. You would not be able to do this kind of thing in Champions. Enemy characters are just too versatile, and they can just flash you or entangle you or whatever, and that's going to be the end of it. Is that another boss over there? Alright, let's taunt these guys out. You can see how useful taunt can be. It's got a pretty narrow radius, so it's not going to taunt everybody, but it brings a couple of guys over. Not bad. But what I tried to do anyway, even though it's really hard to play a Scrapper in a game other than City of Heroes, I always tried to make my character play as much as I could like a Scrapper. Gosh, I didn't even see these guys. That was sloppy. And so I mean, I did this in like the Saga of Rhizome, which I played for a while. I tried to make a character, you can kind of design your own skills and stuff in that game, and I tried to build a character that, you know, was basically offensive primary, defensive secondary, if you will, in a basically open skill game. When I played on Champions Online, one of my frustrations was I was trying to build a character that was like a Scrapper, and it didn't quite work the same way. When I play video game, like other video role-playing games, I often try to make a Scrapper-esque character because I really like this playstyle. It's a playstyle that works for me, right? And so I try to basically just convert to this, you know, having the same playstyle as much as I can, assuming I want to play that way. Right now, I mean, obviously, in some games I might just want to play a spellcaster or something. I don't always play Scrappers. But yeah, the whole idea of it is you've got to find what works for you, and then use that to develop your own style of play, right? And play the way that you find fun, rather than the way other people are telling you to play, including me. I don't tell people how to play. I always say, this is how I play it, this is how I do it, and I always try to be very clear. You do not want to try and copy me if you want to do endgame stuff, because I don't do endgame stuff, right? When this character hits level 50, that will be the end of this series. Now, I may play her a little bit to show you guys how the veteran levels work, but when this character hits level 50, that'll basically be the end of this series, and I'll start a new character. Probably going to be some kind of Dominator. Might be Fire, because Fire's very interesting to me. Might be Ice, we'll see. There's other stuff you can play. I'll have to look at the choices. Oh man, I almost ran out of endurance here. Going way too fast through these spawns. So we've got to definitely put more endurance reducers on our powers. Now that we have this fourth toggle. Alright, now we have to lead her out through 4 levels. This is the part I could do without. Right, just the whole idea of... I don't mind the ambushes, but when the ambushes are over, and we're just leading them out through empty levels, that's kind of boring. Let's see if they res. So anyway, guys, this is how we do a flashback mission with the XP turned off. You still do get I don't know if you get enhancements on flashback missions. Wow, the ambushers are coming really fast. I don't mind that. It's actually a challenge. Yeah, we're going to have to definitely watch that endurance. So we'll take a look at the enhancements when we get out of this mission. And I'll show you what I'm thinking about for level 31. Now that we have this power that's doing a lot of... charging us a lot of endurance. Wait. No, come up. This way. Follow me. At least they're ambushing us. I don't mind the escort missions so much if you're being ambushed. I mind them when the ambushes don't happen. Now, I think sometimes what's going on is there is a programmed ambush and, like, they just don't ambush you correctly, right? The AI can't find you, and they get lost. They get hung up on a hallway or in a corridor, right? And then it feels like you're walking out through an empty building because the ambush couldn't find you. In this case, it found us, which is great. Man, this is like the same exact level, is it? Almost looks like it. So by the way, guys, there are lots of other City of Heroes channels that you could watch. If you like a different playstyle, you should definitely look around on YouTube for people who are playing the game the way you want to play it if you are going to use these videos as kind of a guide on how to do it. I mean, I do not make build guides and stuff like that, and the part of the reason is that I don't really expect other people to necessarily want to play it the way I do. So I show you my logic of why I've done what I do with my characters. Are you kidding me? We missed somebody? Am I seriously going to have to auto-complete a flashback mission? Somebody must have rezzed that I missed. And Lord only knows where that is. I'm going to pause it here, guys, and I'll bring you back if I can find who it is. So there's some guys up here. I think these are it. I haven't seen anybody else. And they're in the same room that the boss was in, so it makes sense that if you're having to defeat the leader and his crew, you would need to get these guys. And that is the mission, and it grays out now because we've completed the flashback mission. So the idea of this is, this happened when Liberty Last was 29th level, but we didn't see it. Right, so now we're going to go back to, I believe, the Ouroboros thing. Hang on, you can't be flying while you're doing this. What's going on? I thought you couldn't be flying, didn't I? What? I thought you couldn't be flying while you were doing this. Is it broken now? Oh, here we go. Okay, yeah, it shouldn't have let me do that in the air. So I don't know what happened. So let's head back here. Oh, you go straight to the contact. Okay. And he says, we got a clue. We have available missions, and we're going to continue the story arc, but I will do that off screen. I hope you guys enjoyed, and until next time, I am Scrapper Lock, and this has been City of Heroes, and we will start next time with Season 3.